Masei. And I'm going to speak about two things. First, I'm going to speak about the order of the psukim, the order of the story. And I want to focus on the mitzvah of the cities of the Levim, the Ari Levim. That's an interesting mitzvah. We'll talk about that today a little bit. So before I start, I want to introduce it a little bit with something that I saw from Tzvi Yehuda. It says like this, that when we learn Chumash, we learn from what's each sentence, each idea, each paragraph. There's always like an idea or a number of ideas and a number of angles in each pasuk, in each discussion. There's so much depth in each part of the Chumash. And you'll find mostly in the Mefarshim, the commentaries, that's mostly what they focus on, primarily. They talk about a pasuk that needs explaining, or a section of it needs explaining a certain mitzvah, and they go into that. So that's one aspect of Chumash. There's another aspect is that the Chumash is speaking to us through the order of events, and that's also a type of language. And so, like for example, for Tzvi Yehuda, that he made that one of his big projects, and it's a very interesting thing also. So he said like this. He quoted the Maharal. The Maharal says, just like there's an order to nature, you look around at the world, you see there's a terrific order here. Thank you. Everything has a vast divine order. So the Maharal says, there's also order to miracles. Like miracles aren't random, even though it seems like a miracle pops up all of a sudden and it's not part of the system. Actually, there's another system of miracles. That's what the Maharal says. A very deep idea. But, what it means on one foot is, it means that there's different levels of reality. And when a miracle appears, it's coming out of a different level, a deeper level of reality, which you usually don't see. And there's a whole system over there also. And it's not random, and it's part of, it's coming with an order. Okay. So then he also said that when Hashem talks to us through the Torah, he says that's the system of miracles also. That's part of that. In other words, the way Hashem talks to us in the Chumash is not the same way we talk to each other or we write to each other. Well, that's with the human mind. Where the Chumash talks to us, that's talking with the divine mind. So it's just like when you learn a pasuk in the Torah or a discussion in the Torah, so you see there's so much depth in it. And you have to look at the commentaries to start to see what's inside it, And you see so many different things in it, and different people see different things. And the more you know, the more you can see in it. So the same thing with the order. Also, Hashem talks to us in the order of things. It's a different way of talking. So you have to listen to the commentaries and focus in it in a deeper way to try to pick up what's the divine message. So he calls that the order of miracles also. It's like coming from the other world, from Hashem's higher wisdom. It's now being, thank you. It's now being brought down into words and stories in an order. So when you try to understand the order, that's also hearing the order of miracles, so to speak. Okay. So I wrote it out. I didn't want to go through all the psukim together here. I don't know how you guys usually do it, but I decided I want to speak about the order of the psukim here. And so I wrote out a little summary of what happens, the order. So we don't have to go through all of the psukim. I don't want guys to get lost. It's a very confusing, big chumash, you got to see the picture, it's hard. So I wrote down like a sort of a summary. So at the end of Parshat Matot. So what happens there is the Jewish nation is encamped on the east bank of the Jordan River, across from Eretz Canaan, on the land that they conquered from Sichon, the king of Heshbon, and Og, the Melech of Bashan. So as the Jews were coming across towards Eretz Yisrael, they were attacked by Og, by Sichon. They conquered them. They took their lands. We got these big, bountiful, spacious lands from the lands of Sichon and Og. So that's where we're camped there. We're on the edge of the Jordan River, getting ready to cross into Eretz Yisrael. And so all the Jewish nation is camping out over there. And what happens is the number 2, the tribes of Gad and Asher request to settle there. Not Asher.
Yeah, Gad and Reuben.
Gad and Reuben, yeah, sorry, mistake. The tribes of Gad and Reuben, they request to settle there. So they say like this, they say we have a lot of cattle, there's a lot of grazing land here, so we'll just make our inheritance over here on the east side of the Jordan. as you know, we're adding on a section not according to the original plan. That's on the west side of the Jordan, and that's where the original Eretz Canaan, the plan for us to settle is. We want to settle already outside here. We want to extend Eretz Israel to across to the other side of the Jordan. So the tribes of Reuven and Gad and Reuven, they request to settle there. Moshe agrees on condition that they first participate in the settling of the rest of the tribes in Eretz Canaan first. So Moshe gets upset. He says, "What are you doing? You're like, you don't want to go to Eretz Israel?" And they said, "No, we want to help everyone go. We'll go with them, you know." And it goes back and forth. And then they agree that if the tribes of Gad and Reuven, they go in front and they go with the armies and they do what it takes to settle Eretz Israel, so then they'll go back and they'll get their inheritance on the east side of the river. So that's that story. Okay, now what happens now, we go into the next parsha. We go to Parshat Masei. That's our parsha. So it starts with the recounting of all the traveling that the Jewish nation did from the time of leaving Egypt until arriving at the Jordan. Moshe recounts the 42 stages of the journey of Am Yisrael through the desert from Egypt to the Jordan. So that's the first part of this parsha. It describes everything that happened, the 42 stages of traveling. When we were in the Midbar, we were in the Midbar with the clouds over us, and when the cloud would indicate, it would lift up, it would tell us it's time to travel, and then all the camps would get together, they would travel. As long as the cloud was guiding them, they would travel. When the cloud stops, spread it over the camp, they would all stop. And so there was different lengths of the journey. Sometimes it was one day. Sometimes it was a month they would travel. Sometimes they would camp for one day. Sometimes they would camp for a year, 2 years. So there was different, and they followed the cloud through the desert. But altogether there were 42 journeys through the desert. Okay, so that's what happens in the beginning of Parshat Masei. Describes that. A whole recounting of all the stages of the journey. And now, number 4. What happens after that? Hashem commands us to drive the Canaanites out of Canaan, and then to settle and divide it up among the tribes of Israel. Here is, according to the Ramban, this is the mitzvah, one of the places where the mitzvah is described, that we are obligated to settle the land of Eretz Israel. And even if it's not, even to all the Meforshim, right now, that's for sure the mitzvah. What we're doing right now is we have to go in, we have to make sure that they make room for us, either by making peace with us, or by leaving, or if not, then we have to battle them. So we have to take over Eretz Canaan and divide it up to all the different tribes. And then it goes into all the details of how it's going to be divided up. It starts to talk about the division, the numbers, the tribes, and this and that. It starts to talk about how it's divided. That's number 4. Number 5, Hashem commands us to make cities of refuge together with the 42 cities of the Levites. So when we're going there, we're going to divide up the Eretz Canaan into the 12 sections of the 12 tribes. But also there's going to be 3 cities for people that kill someone by accident, cities of refuge. And those are going to be, apparently they're going to be sort of part of the cities of the Levites. The Levites will also be there or also be involved in those cities somehow. It's not too clear that what the Levim have to do with these cities, but they're also Eri Levim sort of. But then there's 42 cities for the Levim. So that's what it describes in the pasuk. So basically, there's 42 cities for the Levim, and there's 3 cities for the refugees from people that killed someone by accident. Okay, so that's the order of the story over here. First, it describes in Parshas Matot, we finished the Milcham with Midian, where they're camping on the banks of the Jordan in the lands of Sichon and Oz. Then what happens is Gad and Reuven, they want to stay there. So they work that out. They have to go out in front, they'll come back, they're going to end up staying there. Then we get to the new parsha. What happens? It talks about all the stages of what happens since we left Egypt until now. And then after that, what happens? Describes how the land is going to be divided up to the other 9.5 tribes. Right? And then after that, it describes that we have to make these cities for refugees within the boundaries of the other 12 tribes, and also within those same boundaries, also make the cities of the Levim who don't have their own land, but their cities are distributed throughout the land of the other tribes also. So that's the order here that I want to discuss. So before I go further, so what do you guys think about the order here? Make sense? It's what? Any questions?
Why 42?
Why 42? Why 42? Okay, that's a good question. Okay. Any?
So this is something very interesting because the Torah is already telling us that it's going to be murder in our times, or when the people conquer the land.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be like a kind of idyllic world, but it's going to happen in this.
That's a good question. I hear that also. Well, it's the world of nature. Even it's not, and so there could be accidental deaths. And not only that, could even be intentional deaths. It talks about that also, and so it's not just like paradise. It's potentially paradise, but that's a long process. So meanwhile, the Torah accounts for the realities on the ground.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, so one question I would want to point out here is that after what the order is a little bit strange. The order seems to be, there's something strange in the order here. Because first it talks about they're camping out there on the east side of the Jordan. Then what happens, they decide, Gad and Reuben say, they pipe up, they say, we want this for our portion. And that's the whole discussion. Finally, they settle that. That's going to be their portion. What would have been logical to happen after that? Talk about the portions of the other tribes. You're starting now to portion out Eretz Yisrael. But something comes in the middle. Comes in the middle is the recounting of the 42 stages of the journey. What does nothing to do with settling the land. All of a sudden, in the middle of this discussion, as they're on the edge, they're getting ready to settle the land, they talk to Gad and Reuben. All of a sudden, now they do a review in the middle of all the stages of the journey. Nothing to do with settling the land. Nothing to do with being on the east side of the Jordan. Out of context. That's the question. That's what I wanted to bring up. Yeah?
I don't understand why it's necessarily out of context. If we're now finishing the chapter of being in, like not being in Israel, we're about to cross the Jordan. So we're kind of, we did until we cross the Jordan. And then when we cross the Jordan and conquer the land, then we'll talk about portioning the land. Doesn't make sense. We'll talk about how to split the land if you haven't conquered. We have hundreds of, 31 kings of Canaan.
Yeah, but that comes now also. We do it is what happens. We're still here, and the command is now coming, how we're going to divide up the land, and how we're going to make our Levium and everything. That does happen right now. Except before that, in the middle, they didn't wait till they come in. That had to be talked about beforehand. There's paragraphs and paragraphs about that, how it's going to be divided up, and so that does happen here.
In this.
Yeah, in this parsha, yeah, right when they're here on Arvei Moav, right here when they're on the east side of the Jordan. So that does happen here. So it would have made sense to skip the part about the stages of the journey, put that maybe afterwards or somewhere else, or maybe in Sefer Devarim, maybe that'd be a good place to talk about recounting everything, because that's what we do in Sefer Devarim, instead of putting it right here. That's the question. Because no, they have to make a plan how it's going to be portioned out. Even now, there was more details when we get down to it, but here it's already in Sefer Yeshua. There's more details, but this is what we're talking about now in the Chumash. Yeah. Okay, so that's a question. You get the question? Question is, why in the middle of discussing that they're getting ready to enter Eretz Yisrael and to divide it up, they talked about dividing up Og Vasichan on the other side to Gad and Reuben, but they should have gone after that to talk about the other 9.5 tribes. Instead they put in the middle this traveling. Okay, so it's interesting. Okay, now I want to show you the Kli Yakar, a very interesting thing here. Let's learn this together. This Kli Yakar. Arba Mishtayim Ir. So the pasuk says. In fact, if you maybe look in the Chumash, we'll see the Chumash a little bit together. Let's do this. Look over to. It's on page 380, I think.
What pasuk?
1 second. Hold on 1 second. Hey, there it is. Yeah, page 360. No, go back. 359. Go back to there. It says there's Lamed Hey, chapter 25. See it right at the beginning there. V'davar Shem al Moshe ba'arvot Moav al Yarden Yerecho. So Hashem spoke to Moshe on Arvot Moav. That's the place where they were camping. You guys see it? Page 359.
59.
Yeah, 359.
What chapter?
At the beginning of the chapter. Chapter Lamed Hey. Chapter 25. V'davar Shem al Moshe ba'arvot Moav al Yarden Yerecho lemor. So Hashem spoke to Moshe in Arvot Moav on Yarden Yerecho, saying, Tzavet b'nei Yisrael v'natnu levim minachalat achuzatam arm lashavet umigrish la'arim savivotehem titnu levim. So, command the b'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people, they should give to the Levim, they give to the Levies inheritance, cities to live in, and also space around them, fields around them. V'yu ar lehem l'shevet migrishehem. You live in Hemtom, they will live in the cities, and the fields will be for their animals. V'chusham v'chol chaytam u'migrashei arim v'shetnu levim v'kira ir. It said it goes on. Okay, skipping now a little further. And then you go to 6, pasuk 6. V'ta'arim asher tidnu levim, and the cities which will give to the Levim, et sheish arei miklat, there will be the 6 cities of refuge. Asher tidnu, which will give lenus shama rotzeh, to flee there the person who killed. V'alehem tidnu arba'im u'shtayim ir, and on them you'll add on another 42. So there are 6 cities that are also connected to the Levim, but they're primarily for a city of refuge. Then there's the 42 more that are for the Levim. V'kol ha'arim asher tidnu levim arba'im mishmona ir et hen ve'et migrashayim. Okay. Okay. So another interesting thing here in this pasuk, I just want to bring out something that it's interesting that for some reason you find the Levim did not have their own land and their own property, and also you find interesting thing is that the cities of refuge were together with the cities of Levim. There's a connection there, so that's also interesting. What's that about? So now let's see the Kli Yakar. So you guys see back in the page? I'm going to read it. I'm going to translate it myself. You guys look in the English, whatever. Arba'im Shtayim Ir, 42 cities. Keneged Membed, 42 Chaniyot, Yisrael Chanu Behem, V'Kulam Kegerim. Kach Natnu Levim, Shlo Haya Lehem Chelek Be'eretz. Mem Beit Ir, Ve'ir. So it says like this, the Kli Yakar, one of the great Perushim of the Chumash. So he said there were 42 cities, and the 42 corresponds to, this one, someone asked this question, why 42? 42 corresponds to the 42 encampments of Yisrael that they camped in the desert. V'Kulam Kegerim, and they were in all of them like Gerim, like strangers. Kach Natnu Levim, Shlo Haya Lehem Chelek Be'eretz, Mem Beit Ir. So the same thing, Levium, they didn't have their own portion of the land. They were also like Gerim, sojourners. They also got 42 cities. Ve'ir Miklat Yu Min Ari Levim. Also, the city of refuge will be among the cities of the Levium. Okay, so first of all, interesting thing here in the numbers, right? That there's 42 stages of traveling through the desert, and there's also 42 cities for the Levium. That's one thing. Now also, another interesting thing is, in the cities of Levium were also the cities of refuge. So what's that about? Va'aria miklat iyu min aria Levim, fisha hanes, fisha nas el ir miklato, rehu shama ger. The reason why the cities of refuge were in the cities of the Levium is because the guy who's running away from his home, he's a ger also. He's also out of his place. He's also a sojourner, a stranger. V'yesh tachush pen yomulo yoshveya aretz gerata ba'aretz. Maybe the people that live in the place, in the settled place, if he would go to other shvatim, places where they're settled, where they're not Levium, they would say, okay, and there would be an attitude that you guys are outsiders. The guys that are fleeing because they had to go to refuge. Therefore, they commanded that the cities of refuge should be the cities of Levim. Kigam haLevim kegerim, because also the Levim are like sojourners. Yomru lo mum shebacha al tomar lechavercha. And there's an expression: if you have a disability of some kind, so don't condescend to your friend in that way. So in other words, if a person has a certain thing, so people are, they're in their homes and they're all settled, and someone comes, so they could have a certain condescension for the guests. But so they didn't want that to happen. So therefore, that's Kiyakar says. That's why they made the cities of refuge in the cities of Levim, because the Levim also don't have their own place. Levim are also like Gerim. That's what he says, because they live in the cities which are part of someone else's nachala, inheritance. And therefore they put the cities of refuge together with the cities of Levim, because they also are out of place. They're both out of place. So therefore they're going to mix easier together. They're not going to condescend. It's going to be like a more natural place for the refugees to go to, more pleasant for them to go to. Okay. So let me tell you an idea here about the order of these things. So going back to the question, why do we talk in the middle about the stages of the journey from Egypt? Like this whole parsha the whole thing is about moving into Eretz Yisrael. We're camping on the banks. First, God and Reuven get their portion. Then everyone else gets their portion. We divide it up to all the tribes. We're talking about all that in length, right? And then Levium and the Ari Miklat. Right before we start talking about everyone else, between God and Reuven and everyone else, we talk about a review of the stages of the journey, which is not the same subject at all. Two different subjects in the middle, right? Oh, so now when you listen to the Kli Yakar, you start to hear a hint to what this is about, this connection. Because he points out that it's the same number. The number of stages of journey are the same numbers of the cities of Levim. And what does that mean? So it could mean like this, that when people are coming into a land, so the Jews have been traveling, they've been on foot for many, many years, right? 40 years. They were in Galut before that. They were traveling through the desert for 40 years. Now they're coming into Eretz Canaan. So Eretz Canaan, what happens is we have to be at our best as we come to Eretz Yisrael. We have to be constantly dynamic, constantly creative, constantly growing as individuals, as a nation in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is all about that. Eretz Yisrael, that's brought from Reb Moshe Charlap. Eretz Yisrael is constantly bringing out creativity and growth. What happens if you come into Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, and you settle there? And everyone has their own nachala. And it's very nice. In fact, it's super nice. Like Eretz Yisrael is nothing like it. And especially then when the whole Am Yisrael was there and everything was flourishing. So then everyone would get their own, they would be with their families and their extended families and their whole tribe, and they would have agricultural lifestyle, and they would have all the blessings of this world, as well as, whatever they brought with them. So what's going to happen naturally? What's going to happen is there's going to become a type of habitual living, type of complacency. There might be a lack of continued growth. Yes?
Regarding the city of refuge, what I learned was, like, we learned from Mitzrayim that Leviim were the only one who were learning Torah. So that's the reason why the Leviim population was also not as much as the rest of the Am Yisrael. And the city of refuge were on the east side, which was less of the tribe, but they have 3 cities of refuge because they were more prone to such mishap. And on the west side, there was also 3. It's the same number. And the reason for that was because people who did such mistakes in their life learn Torah with them. Yeah. And they,
So you're saying another reason. It's good. It's a good word. You're saying that another reason why. Very good. Yeah, that's a good idea also. Okay, that's nice. I like that. Okay, but meanwhile, let's see where this goes here. Here's another idea. There's that the Leviim are Gerim also. They don't have their own spot. They weren't given a nachala. And so that goes together with the refugees. Yeah, that would be a more natural match. But it's interesting, there's 42 stops in the Midbar. There's 42 cities of Levim. So that can't be an exile.
Well,
Right.
But
Hashem,
including
Hashem guide them in the desert, and he made these 42 stops.
Oh,
And then he also say that 42 cities. So
right. So why are they both 42?
so it's like he knew that he want 42 cities.
You're very good.
42 stops.
Right.
So he did 42
Oh,
stops.
so the
it's like,
very good. Okay, so the
but
Kli Yakar
total
is saying that that the connection is, he's saying connection is that there has to do with not being fixed. It has to do with being in transition, right? So in the desert, we were traveling through the desert like this. We had no homes. We had to go, and whenever the cloud moved, the people had to move. Cloud stopped, you had to stop. It was very transitory. So that comes as we're getting ready to talk about the Nachalaot, right? That everyone's going to have his own different portion. First, the Torah puts in this story about Moshe recounting everything, all the different trips, the 42 stages. It teaches that as we come to Eretz Yisrael, we have to keep that quality of not being fixed in this world. That's the remez. That's the hint, right? That we traveled, we learned what it means to always be growing, always be connected to Hashem, always be looking ahead, never being in a place of passivity. So that could be the hint why all of a sudden Moshe reviewed it right before he starts talking about the Nachalot, because he tells them we're going to come in, we're going to settle, we're going to have the other aspect. We're going to join together two aspects of being human, of life. We're going to have a certain sense of security. We're going to be settled in Eretz Yisrael. It's going to be our home. We're going to be connected to the land. We're going to be connected to each other. We're going to raise our families. We're going to be able to protect ourselves from our enemies. We're going to be very settled in Eretz Yisrael, very connected to Eretz Yisrael. And through that, we're going to be connected to Hashem. But at the same time, we don't be too settled. We don't forget that we always have to be growing, changing, connecting to what's beyond this world, right? So therefore, before they talked about settling the Eretz Yisrael, they talked about how reviewed how we came to the Midbar with the 42 different campments to tell us that what we learned from that whole process was preparing us how we're going to have to live in Eretz Yisrael. Not to forget that life is not about comfort and stationary, experience. It has to be constant growth. So, if so, that also explains what the Levim are doing here, and why Levim have 42 cities, because Levim are the people that are the ones that are creating that atmosphere. We're depending on the Levim. They're the ones who are especially close to Hashem. They're learning Torah all the time. And so what's going to happen is we're going to make these cities for Levim, and we're going to make the Levim not fixed. They're going to keep They're going to keep in the state of sort of being, not being fully at rest. Yeah. So that's why their cities were given inside the nachalot of everyone else. They didn't have their own nachla. They were sort of like Gerim. They're compared to Gerim, the Levim, in a certain way, because how did Levim make their living? Mainly from Meiser. They get Meiser Levi. You give Meiser Levi every year. Every third year, you also give Meiser Aniyim. It would work as the first year after the third year and the fifth year after the Shemitah, they would give Meiser Aniyim, and that would include Gerim in many cases. And so they're both getting Meiser. So the Levim and the Gerim have a lot in common, because they're both Gerim. And that's how Levim, that's Hashem made it. The Levim should be like that they should not have their own nachla, because their job is to constantly be growing, learning, and making that influence in all of Am Yisrael, that don't forget that we're always meant to be growing, even though we have this wonderful Olam Hazeh, all this connection to the land, etc. So that could be the connections here that the Kli Yakar is pointing out. If you just skip to the another page here where I quote the Rambam. Look at the last page. I think it's on the last page. It says, oh no, not the last page. On mine it's the second page. It says, Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Shemitah V'Yovel, Yud Gimel. See where it says that? Let me read the Rambam for a second. Lama lo zacha Levi b'nachlat Eretz Yisrael u'b'bizata. Why didn't Levi merit to the inheritance of Eretz Yisrael and in its booty? Imachav mipnei shehuvdu lavod et Hashem. Together with his brothers, because he was set aside to serve Hashem. L'sharto, and to service him. L'harot drachav hayesharim u'mishpatav hatzadikim, and to teach his ways, his righteous ways, and his judgments, his righteous judgments. The Rabbi to the many. Shenemar yoru mishpatecha liYaakov toratcha liYisrael. He will teach your judgments and your Torah to Israel. Lefikach huvdolu medarchei olam lo orchim milchama kishar Yisrael. Therefore, they were separated from the ways of the world. They didn't make war. They didn't go out to war like the rest of Yisrael. V'lo nochlin, and they didn't inherit inheritance. V'lo zochin la'atzman b'kol kufan. They didn't, because of what they did, they didn't come to any inheritance. Elohim chel Hashem, but they are the troops of Hashem. Shnemar beirach Hashem chelo. Barech Hashem chelo. Hashem will bless his troops. That means the Levim. And Hashem has them as a special portion. So that's the matter of the Levim, that they didn't have an inheritance. Hashem didn't want that. Levim are the ones that set aside to learn to serve Hashem. So here you get a little picture now. We're coming to Eretz Yisrael. We're getting ready to divide up the land. We started dividing it already. And the east side of the Jordan, we're going to now divide up on the west side of the Jordan to the other 9.5 tribes. But before we do that, we talk about how we traveled through the Midbar. Because even when we're settled, we have to still be in this process of not being overly attached to our sense of security, our sense of connection to the earth. We have to be in a constant of learning and growing. So, and then later it talks about we have to make the cities of Levim, cities of the refugees and Levim. Because why? Because Levim are the ones who are going to remind us that we constantly have to grow and constantly learning Torah, constantly getting closer to Hashem, not forgetting about what we're doing there to Israel, even though we're very connected to Hashem through the land as well. There's this combination. And the cities of refuge, why were they together with the cities of Levim? So you could say another reason. Because why would it happen, is it responding to your question also, why would it happen that somebody actually accidentally kills someone else? How would that happen? It happened because he wasn't careful. And that's why you have to go to refuge. If it was a total accident, you wouldn't have to go. But if it's something you could have known, like let's say your axe handle was not fixed strong enough and it went flying off and killed a guy, or you just weren't paying attention, you fell off a ladder and killed a guy, So in those cases, you're going to have to go to exile. Why did it happen? Because people are too comfortable. They're forgetting to be careful of the things they have to be careful of. That could happen as people get more settled and complacent. So therefore, they have to go to the city of refugee, to the city of Levim, also where they're out of their place. They're in exile. Because they're learning this idea that you have to always be growing, always be connected to the Torah. When people become complacent, then they can also become careless. So the reason of Levim there and why the people, refugees are there is the same reason. Because they're in this state of constant growth. And that's going to affect, by the Levim at least, going to affect what happens to all of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so, good, makes sense? It's fascinating that it comes together, the settling in the land, becoming very connected, very organized, very socially cohesive, serving Hashem through nature, but not forgetting that we're always learning Torah and always growing and never stopping. And we learned that from the whole process of the 42 stages in the Midbar, that we were getting that lesson. Life is not about security and comfort. So now number 42. I think we're going to hear about more of this tomorrow also, but what's the 42? So there's a lot of things in this 42. Yes. 42 is a significant number, and it has to do with change. Like when people are changing from one thing to another, there's this number 42. You see it in example. I'll give an example. How's that 42? That was his number? That's so funny. Okay. Too bad it wasn't Sandy Koufax. I know. Wasn't Jewish either. Oh, he was. I see. Anyway, so 42 is a big number. It represents one of the names of Hashem. It's a lofty thing. It has to do with connecting to Hashem. Also, if you know, there's this prayer we say on various occasions, Ana B'Koach, right? So that prayer, it has 7 stanzas, each one with 6 words in it. So it's 42, right? And if you notice when we say that, we say it whenever there's a transition. For example, you say it in Korbanot. Between the Korbanot, this is the way I understand it at least, that you say it towards the end of Korbanot, because Korbanot is all about the world of doing, serving Hashem through action, bringing animals, doing the Korbanot. And then you're going up to the next level, which is the Pesuk de Zimra. First is Korbanot, then is Pesuk de Zimra. And in between you say Ana B'Koach. Pesuk de Zimra is about speech and poetry. That's the second part. So the Ana B'Koach comes between. Also, it could be from the night to the day you're transitioning. Also at night by Leil Shabbat, by Kabbalat Shabbat, as we're bringing in Shabbat, we say Ana B'Koach, because we're transferring from the world of the weekday to the world of Shabbat. And also by Sfirat HaOmer, when there's a transference from going out of Egypt to receiving the Torah, that's also we're going up in levels. So we say Ana B'Koach. After you say Sfirat HaOmer, you say Ana B'Koach.
Ana B'Koach says like set us free.
Set us free.
But,
Yeah.
Not only physically, but also spiritually.
Spiritually. It's all about the spiritual. Yeah.
It just reminded me of Chet HaMeraglim. Because when we read the Parsha, it was like after the 2 years of journey that they sent out the spy. So I'm just trying to add this number together. Because Chet HaMeraglim happens after 2 years of journey.
Okay.
And from then on, they add 40 years. That you're going to have to travel 40 years because I don't want you guys to get inside the Eretz Israel. Is that correct? Because
It wasn't 42. It was 40 altogether.
Yeah, it does not say all 2 years and another 40 years.
No, that's not that.
However, I'm just trying to put those numbers together.
Okay.
Because it doesn't make sense to me. Like, hold on a second. We have already journeyed 2 years, and now the Chet HaMeraglim happens, and say 40 years. Hold on. We are not in the first year. We have already passed 2 years, so it's only 38 years.
Okay.
But why would it specify 40 years of journey? So I was just trying to put those
okay.
numbers together. Is
Okay.
it possible
To work on that.
although it says 40 years, it means 42 years because 2 years.
Okay. In any case, there were 42 stages of this transfer from Egypt to Eretz Israel, because that's the number that signifies transferring, going from level to level. That's why I just had thought about Ana B'Koach myself. I was thinking that when you're transferring from level to level, and the whole Sefer B'Midbar is about that. It's transferring from the desert to Eretz Yisrael. And as you see, the Sefer B'Midbar is full of problems. People making mistakes, people falling apart, all kinds of troubles, because when you're in that transferring stage, that's the most difficult stage. People get confused. They left behind what they're used to, and they didn't arrive at what they're going to. So there's a shtickle free fall, it could be. It takes a lot of koch. So there's this tefillah that you pray when you're transferring from level to level. Also, to go from the weekday to Shabbos, it's not so easy. How do you get into Shabbos? So you say Ana B'Koach. So if you look at the words of Ana B'Koach, you'll see that it's all about asking Hashem to be compassionate to Am Yisrael. So I think that's very interesting because it's the individual is making a transference from one level to the next, and you expand your awareness, and you ask that Hashem should help all Jewish people. So it could be that's particularly what helps you with transitions. When a person is on his own, he's trying to get from level to level, he get confused in the middle. So what could he do? What's his tefillah? He could start asking, help me together with all of Am Yisrael. And somehow that expands your das, and that's Hashem will help you when you look at yourself as part of Am Yisrael, because then you're part of the bigger mission. That's the thought I had about this. But in any case, that's the tefillah of being transferring from level to level. How long do I have? When does it go to 12:15? 12:10? Okay, good. Yeah. So there's a lot to talk about here. This is very interesting. Okay. So this number 42 is very significant. So there are 42 camps in the Midbar. There are 42 cities of Levian. 42 psukim, words in Ana B'Koach, because this is about the state of not being stationary. It's about moving, going from level to level, and it's hard to do that. See, that's what I was saying. Like in order to go from level to level, you have to have a lot of discomfort, because you're leaving things behind. You don't know how it's going to work. You need to have a lot of bitachon, a lot of trust Hashem, that as you go from level to level, He'll help you. So that's what you have the Levim for in Eretz Yisrael. The people that are sitting and learning the whole day and teaching the Torah, they're reminding us, they're helping us to keep moving from level to level. Even though things are very nice, and very secure in some level, we have to keep moving. Okay, good. So questions, comments on that so far? So that would explain anyway. So that sort of answers the question. I thought that was really, really interesting idea over here, that in the middle they talked about the stages of traveling as they're talking about inheriting the land. Because we have to put the two together. Even after you inherit the land and you settle it, you have to keep traveling. You have to keep and that comes from the 42 cities of the Levium, which reflect the 42 stages of the travel. Okay. So now let's talk about nowadays. Let's talk about nowadays, our times now. So what's going on now? So now we're back in Eretz Yisrael. And what's the problems we're struggling with? Same problem.
The thing is that people are not coming to Israel as fast as it should be.
Okay, that's a different problem. That's going to connect into this problem also. But what about the people that are here already and the whole state of society in Israel? Like, it's not perfect yet, right? What do you think our struggles have to do with?
Self-identity.
What?
Self-identity.
Self-identity.
Yeah, to
So
identify themselves what they are and what they're doing.
Okay. Why is that a problem?
Because a lot of times, a lot of Jews don't realize what they are and who they are, and
That's true.
is the most difficult thing.
Okay, that's true.
Because Judaism is not religion; it's a way of life. And you
Okay,
identify
that's
yourself.
good. That's a good point. Yeah, that's good what you're saying. But what I'm trying to point to is I think there's a similar type of problem that we're having now, which is that the Torah is trying to guide us how to deal with it then, is when people come back to their own land and they have a certain, and they become more affluent and settled, right? Mm-hmm. So then, theoretically, if we came back to Eretz Yisrael, we have a lot of people learning Torah also, and we're in our home, and we're connecting to our source, and we're connecting to Kedusha. Kedusha is Eretz Yisrael. So now everyone should be doing tshuva, but not everyone's doing tshuva. And there's a lot of complexity. So maybe it has to do with the same thing also, which is that we're here in our own land. We're not Gerim anymore. We don't seem to be Gerim. This is us. We're Israelis, and we have a certain security. We have our own army. We didn't have that for 2,000 years. And we have our own flourishing society, cities, beautiful cities built to Tiferes, highways, trains, everything keeps getting better, all the services, all the economy. And it's a high-level economy. It's a very successful society in Mosai's Baruch Hashem. So therefore, we're doing well. We're getting security, just like they're going to get in Eretz Yisrael. And as a result, people are forgetting what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. That's part of what's happening.
We just saw that in Akko.
In Akko, yeah. Mm-hmm. How did it happen? How did the Jewish settlement dwindle, and the ones that want to destroy us built up all around us? Where was the government? What happened? Where's the people? Exactly. How did it happen? How does this happen? Exactly. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm going to see Rav Kook. Here's a translation I made on a very interesting piece from Rav Kook. So you see this? Or Techia, Memdalet. This is my translation. I tried to be as faithful as well as trying to figure out the idea as much as I could. So let's learn Rav Kook together on this subject. This is an amazing piece. We have a tradition that there will be a spiritual. It should be spiritual. We have a tradition there will be a spiritual revolution in Eretz Yisrael, and among the Jewish people, in that period of history in which the reawakening of the nation has been fully aroused. So Rav Kook says there's going to be eventually in Eretz Yisrael, after the awakening of the nation has been fully aroused, which means Rav Kook passed away in 1935. He saw there was going to be a new Medina. He was building it. He was getting ready for it with all of his might. There's going to be a full arousal of the nation. That means Medina Yisrael. And when it's going to happen, when there's a Medina Yisrael, there's going to eventually be something called a spiritual revolution, he says. Okay, going further. In an early stage of this reawakening, a sense of well-being will result from the affluence that will come to a portion of the nation. In the early stage of this reawakening, of the Techiyat Am, the coming to life of the Jewish nation. There will be a sense of well-being, a sense of prosperity, will result from the affluence that come to a portion of the nation. There will be a lot of affluence. A lot of people will become wealthy and well-to-do and upper middle class. And this will bring many to imagine that they have already arrived at their goal. And this will bring about in them a shrinking of the soul. That's what's going to happen in Eretz Yisrael. So this is like Rav Kook, sort of prophetic.
Rav Kook wrote this?
Yeah. This is the period that the prophet was referring to when he said, days will come in which there is no desire in them. Yamim ba'im she'ein li chafetz behem. Days will come that I don't desire them. So that's the pasuk says. So it's interesting what that means. So Rav Kook is giving a very unique interpretation. Hashem says, I don't have desire in them because the people don't have desire. It means through the Jewish people, Hashem will be desiring, good things, spiritual things. But there will be a time will come when the people won't be looking for spiritual things. They'll become complacent. Something's going to happen to the people. There's going to be a shrinking of the soul as they have affluence. The ambition to achieve lofty and holy goals will recede. People will stop looking for spiritual, lofty, holy goals. And as a result, their spiritual element will sink down. The spirituality will sink. So Rav Kook predicts that. Then there will arise stormy, difficult times which will result in a spiritual revolution. So things will get difficult and complex, and there will eventually be a spiritual revolution. It will then become clear to all that the strength of Israel is in the light of Hashem and His Torah, and in Klal Yisrael's desire for that spiritual light. This recognition and focus will be the unstoppable force which will overcome all opposing forces and obstacles. So what's going to happen is, after there is all these complexities that are going to come into the nation as a result of the complacency, as the sinking of the spirit is going to happen to people, there's going to be very difficult times. And then there will be a spiritual revolution. The Jewish people are going to come to life in the spiritual sense. And they'll start realizing that the main thing is getting close to Hashem. The main thing is getting close to Hashem's Torah, learning Hashem's Torah. And bringing out our desire for those things. And then when we get that, then nothing will stop us. Then all the obstacles, external and external, internal and external, will go away. We'll be able to overcome them all. We'll have so much gevura. He talks about great gevura. Great strength. We'll be unstoppable when that inner desire for spirituality becomes our main thing. And the main thing that we realize we have to focus on. Okay, then he goes back a step. The source of the temporary rejection of spirituality, which will occur in that time, will be the drive towards materialism, Rav Kook says. He says, what's going to cause this sinking of the spirituality? It's going to be the drive towards materialism. This will enter into the nation in a very strong way, as it fills the vacuum which had formed over the long period of exile, when the possibility of material ambition had all but vanished from the Jewish nation. What's going to happen? So he says like this. He says, we lived for 2,000 years without... let me read the next part. This materialistic drive, when reborn, will trample... I will explain that. So we lived in the Europe and all the lands we lived in, where we were always on the edge, never in the center of things. Our professions were limited. Our feeling of being a nation was very, very little. We were separated. We were not strong. We didn't live as a nation. We went in our land, and we were separated. The best we had was communities. Maybe cities, but we didn't have a national sense. We didn't have a national strength and an economic strength. It's not possible in the Galut. You don't have economic ambition. Our ambition for achieving economic accomplishment shrunk because it wasn't possible in exile. And now when we happen to come back here to Israel, all of a sudden we're a powerful nation, and the individuals and the nation as a whole, and the politicians, I would add, they all see this possibility for prosperity. And it becomes like there was a big vacuum. We were impoverished in many ways. And even weren't impoverished, there were some individuals who weren't, but as a whole we were. So now there's going to be this drive, materialistic drive is going to come into us, Rav Kook says. He predicts this. There's going to be this strange materialism going to come over the Jewish nation because there was a vacuum for 2,000 years. This materialistic drive, when born, will trample fiercely all obstacles and create tempests. So materialism is fierce. and it's going to be very problematic. That's what he says. When people are pursuing, they want to be upper middle class, and that's the main thing. They want to have 2 cars, they want to have a nice house, they want to have a nice income, and when that is not enough, they want more, and they're pursuing and they're Jewish people, and so they're very lively, and they're very creative, and it builds on itself. Materialism starts to become an ends in itself, and tramples on whatever gets in its way. That's how it works. So that's going to start to happen in Israeli nation, Rav Kook says. These are the Chevlei Mashiach. These are the pains, the birth pains of Mashiach. The birth pains that come with the arrival of the Mashiach, and which will purify the whole world by means of the suffering that they bring about. That's what Rav Kook says. Okay, so that's what we're doing. That's what's happening right now. That's what we're in. And he says eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be a spiritual revolution. Spiritual awakening. People are going to realize this is not it. It's not my 2 cars.
It's starting to happen right now, because apparently 51% of the kids enrolled are in religious schools.
Wow.
More people becoming more Jewish.
Yeah, like 45%, according to Ben Weissman, are religious that they're Shomer Shabbos and everything now.
Okay.
And
it's growing in like a positive.
Yeah, it's growing.
So we're in that battle, though. That's for sure. We're in the situation where we have the different forces. I like what you're saying, Ezra. I think that's correct.
I'm not sure all that's true. I just heard from.
That's what he said. Yeah, I'm not sure. It sounds like maybe a lot, but okay.
It's true, but it's not a conversion. There's just more religious people being born than people need.
Okay, let's go now to the Rambam. I want to say this, Rambam. So my question is now. So what can we do? Like what's going to happen is we know what's going to happen. We know that Hashem is going to make what He wanted to happen from the beginning of creation. He's going to make it happen. Like there's going to be a revolution. There's going to be a spiritual revolution. We're going to overcome this obstacle. But while it lasts, it's going to be very difficult. And we're in it. So what can we do? That's the question.
I want to share an experience from Aharon.
Okay.
Believe it or not, Rav Litzman said anyone wants to share something about the Vato or anything. And this is exactly what I saw when I was there. And I did ask one of the tour guide, and he is right next to the general when he was in the idea visa officials.
Yeah.
I did ask him, the Rav Litzman translated my questions, and what I see is exactly this what happened. I said, I've been to the Lord. I see the character of the non-Jew who were there, the Muslims. They were very hostile in the Lord. But whereas in Akko, they're not that.
Okay.
And I said, all right, we have seen these empty. I said, fine, I understand. But what is the cost of this thing? And this is exactly what. And I said, it reminds me of the story of God and Reuben. He said, what is God and Reuben? What does they represent? Moshe Rabbeinu teach them a very good lesson. He said, your cattle, your flocks are important, but never forget your wife and children are much more important than your cattle and these things. And that is exactly what's happening.
Very good.
We are more into the source of income. We are more into the materialistic world that I need to have these expensive cars.
Right.
And in Akko, when we were down in Kabbalah Shabbat, I see these expensive Mustang or whatever they're trying to buy.
So it seems Rav Kook is saying that this is a sociological event.
Exactly.
Like it's sweeping over the nation. It's not necessarily, it's bigger than individuals. It's filling this vacuum that we've had for all those years. There's this materialism, which is not our essential nature, but it's sweeping us around. It's very difficult. So what do we have to do with this? How can we deal with this? So look at this next Rambam. Look at Yud Gimel on the Rambam. So after describes how the Levim, when we came into Eretz Yisrael, every nation had their own inheritance. Every tribe, I mean, except the Levim. They didn't have an inheritance. They had only the cities of Levim, which were in the other people's portions. So that's what we said before. And that was in order that they should be the people learning and teaching, etc. And then he goes on and says, V'lo Shevet Levi bilvad. This is very famous. Not only Shevet Levi. Elakol ish v'ish v'kol bai olam asher nadva rucho oto v'vino madao lehibadeo lamod l'fnei Hashem l'sharto la'avdo l'datat Hashem. So not only the tribes of Levim, but every person from the whole world that his spirit volunteers him, impels him, and he understands, he has deep depth of understanding, he's going to divide himself to serve Hashem and to know Hashem. V'halach yashar kamosha asahu Elokim. He's going to want to be straight like Hashem made him. Uparak me'al tzavaro Kol cheshbonot harabim asher bikshu b'nei Adam, and he's going to throw off all the considerations people have. He's going to serve Hashem. That's going to be his thing. Harei zen is kadesh, kodesh kadashim. That person will become sanctified with holy of holies. V'yeh Hashem chelko, Hashem will be his portion, like we say about the Leviim, v'nachalato, in his inheritance. The olam, olamei, olami. V'yizker lo b'olam hazeh, devar hamaspik lo, kamo shezach l'kohanim Levim. He'll earn what he needs to, without giving himself over to this world so much. He's going to make his main focus on serving Hashem. Hari David alav shalom omer, Hashem menat chelki v'kosi ata tomich gurli. David Melech said, Hashem, you are my portion. So it's very interesting. So it turns out that not only Shevet Levi, the Rambam says, who are set aside to be constantly moving, constantly learning and teaching, also other people also. Whoever they are, that they see that as their role in Klal Yisrael, they also will do that. And Shevet Levi will be supported by Trumas and Maestras and other ways like that. But also the other people also, Hashem will help them also to get by as they give themselves over to Vodas Hashem. So what I'm pointing out here is that this parsha gives us a sort of a recipe for the solution to the problem. How we can be involved in bringing Hashem's Ratzon out. That if the trouble we have now is that people are too affluent and comfortable in their affluence. Affluence is a good thing, but people could lose sight from that. And their materialism could come sweeping in, and people could start becoming a mouthpiece for foreign attitudes, and all kinds of complexities could come into the world because they're driven by this spirit, this materialistic drive. So what's going to happen is, what can we do? What can anyone do? So the answer is, just like back then, the Levim were set aside to counteract that. That we shouldn't lose our focus, that we're here to grow, to learn Torah, to close to Hashem. And therefore the Levim were the ones set aside for that. And now also that's the same thing. So we have the yeshivot. We have the people that are learning. So that's it. That's the big thing that's going to bring about this revolution. And like you said, Ezra, it's in the schools also. But it's the fact that we learn Torah, and there are people that are set themselves aside for Torah, and that's like everyone's doing here in Machon Meir for the period they're here, and for the period that they continue, and some will do more than others. But then, even if, let's say, not all of us are going to be the guy that's going to make his whole life out of learning and teaching, but we want to be around them. We want to be in the atmosphere. That's what's going on, and we're going to do our part. We're going to be learning as much as we can, and we'll be raising our kids to be as much as we can like that, and we're going to around them. And so that's what's happening. Is that's the key. That's the key to bringing about the spiritual revolution. That people should remember that they're not just here to just be a nation like other nations. And why would that possibly happen? That we would think like that? We're the Jews. We have special neshamas. We have a special mission, special history, special future. Why would it happen that we start thinking like we want to be like other nations? And because this power of materialism takes over, confuses a person, blinds him. He likes the comfort of it. He likes the feeling of it. He needs the anabakoach. He needs that force that helps him be willing to take on that life of change and growth. And what does that? That's the Levim and the people that learn. I want to tell you a few more things about this, something else. I'll tell you something interesting. This is a little bit deeper already. But I heard this from my father-in-law. He said one time, it's a story about the Chazon Ish. You guys heard of the Chazon Ish? The Chazon Ish was this great major leader of Klal Yisrael. He came from Lithuania. He's from Vilna. He was from the Vilna tradition,
When did he live? From what year?
He was here, I don't know when he passed away, maybe in after the war, like in the 50s maybe?
Oh, that's so recent.
Yeah. And so 50s, into 60s, I'm not sure. I think my father knew him, he met him, I don't know, I'm not sure. 50s or 60s, he lived till then. He came before the war, and he was here afterwards. So he was this great Gaon. He wrote very deep svarim on all the halachas and all the Gemaras. So, and if you know Bnei Brak, what it's like, it's one big world of learning Torah, And it's all came out from the Chazon Ish, It wasn't like that before. The Chazon Ish and the Panovich Rav also. So they created this world, which is all about learning. It's sort of like the city of Levim. That's what Bnei Brak is like, And I heard a story that someone would ask the Chazon Ish, they said, what's this thing with cola? Someone asked the Chazon Ish that. Like, what's everyone learning cola for? That's the thing there. Like in Bnei Brak, like cola is the thing, And in many parts of Eretz Yisrael.
In New York,
the greater world.
people in Colo.
Also in New York, there's some. Okay, but in Eretz Yisrael, it's big. In the whole Haredi world, cola is big. And it's getting bigger in our world also, Baruch Hashem. And so they asked the Chazon Ish, like, what's this about? Is everyone really supposed to learn cola? Is that what Klal Yisrael looks like? So the Chazon Ish said, of course not. It's not like that. And we see that. We see from Parsha, there's 12 tribes. One tribe is like that. They're learning the whole time. Everyone else is making a living as well.
Israel has.
And they're building Eretz Yisrael. Not everyone is a coal guy. So they asked the Chazon Ish, was everyone a coal guy? So he said, of course not. That's not the way it's supposed to look. So the Chazon Ish said, I just want to put this out. This is some of my thoughts. And it's a bigger subject than I am, but I still want to just put out my thoughts. So the Chazon Ish said, you're right, but we're after the Holocaust. And what happened to the Jewish nation during the Holocaust was a devastation of our culture and of our focus. So we're making this Kolo world to bring it back. So it's temporary. It's temporary, the Chazon Ish said. But now we want everyone to learn in Kolo. And whoever can learn in Kolo, they should learn in Kolo. Because we're bringing back the proper focus, which Torah is the center of Jewish life. And after the Holocaust we've been through, that got, clouded over. So that's the Chazon Ish. It's very interesting to me. So I want to add on another thought about that. So then how does Rav Kook look at this? Does he look at it the same way? Or is there a big difference, a small difference? So I don't know. I mean, I wish I did know. I don't know. But my thought is like this, that Rav Kook, I don't think he would disagree 100%. I think it's true. We're coming back through Talmud Torah. That's so true. But Rav Kook had an interesting view of things. Rav Kook looked at the whole big picture. He didn't look at us now as after the Holocaust. He looked also at the Holocaust as part of the bigger picture. And after the Holocaust comes Hakamas HaMedina. And he saw that coming. And that's also part of the big picture. So the Chazon Ish didn't look at it that way, Rav Kook did. So what happens now is we're actually sort of back like in the parsha we're just learning about. We're coming in, we're resettling Eretz Yisrael again. And we're not only because of the Holocaust, because that's just part of the process. There's this materialism that came into us, Rav Kook says, that's the divine process that we're going to lose focus for a while, and then there's going to be a revolution. And as we learn, and as we serve Hashem, and as we center around the people that are most dedicated to that, the great Talmid Chachamim, so what happens is we're going to find ourselves fully, and that's all part of the process, So it's not only because of the Holocaust we're bringing it back. The Holocaust itself was part of Hashem's big plan, And what we're doing is we're settling the land here, and we're being Miyashiv Eretz Yisrael, and not everyone's learning a Kolo, Although maybe most of us should be, maybe even a little bit or something like that. This idea of making learning the center of our lives. Okay, not everyone can learn Kolo, but a lot of us can. And a lot of us can learn a lot, and that's what brings around the spiritual revolution, which we need to have. Like in other words, we have to. It's going to happen anyway, but it can come through us. Interesting, right? I mean, there's more to talk about here, but yeah, okay, very good.
Thank you.
Right?